Welcome back, listeners. We always hear that tech makes us stronger. It gives us more control, more solutions. But what if it's actually the opposite? What if the stuff that's supposed to be making the future awesome is actually creating problems that could get out of control? And we're only kind of starting to realize that.
That is exactly the paradox that we're going to unpack today.
Right.
So our source material today is The Coming Wave by Mustafa Suleyman and Michael Bhaskar.
Okay.
And they really get into this idea that this next wave of technology, specifically when we're talking about AI and synthetic biology, which have huge potential upside, also have these unprecedented challenges associated with them, and really challenge our ability to kind of contain and control the power of those technologies.
So you shared this book with me. It is fascinating. And for this deep dive, we're treating The Coming Wave as our roadmap to navigate these really monumental changes. So we're going to break it down together. But can you give us a quick overview of the main things we're going to hit on today?
Yeah. So our goal is to really break down what are the characteristics of this wave, what makes it so challenging to control, and kind of give our listeners a framework for thinking about the future of technology and its impact on their lives going forward.
So I wanted to jump in.
Yeah.
The book starts by talking about waves, and not just like, digital waves or whatever, but really kind of bigger, more foundational forces.
Right.
What do they mean by that?
So they start by kind of drawing this parallel to literal waves, right? So think about a tsunami, just the destructive power of a tsunami, or even like the asteroid that hit the Earth and changed life as we know it.
Wow. Yeah.
So these are unstoppable forces of nature that completely reshape the world.
Okay, that's a pretty dramatic comparison.
Yeah.
So how does that relate to something like the rise of an empire or a major religion?
So then they talk about these metaphorical waves. Right. So how history is also shaped by these forces, like the rise and fall of empires, the spread of belief systems. Like think about Christianity or Buddhism. They start small, and then they become these massive world-changing forces that change power dynamics, change societies.
Across continents.
Across continents over centuries.
Wow.
And the same with technology.
And that's where technology comes in. They see technology in a similar way.
Exactly. They say that from the very beginning of humanity, when we mastered fire, created stone tools, all the way to artificial intelligence.
Wow.
Technology has developed in these waves.
Okay.
And there's almost like this immutable law of technology, that it tends to become more affordable, easier to use, and then it spreads widely.
That makes sense.
Think about farming tools to agricultural machinery, or early photography to the phones that we have in our pockets today. All of that follows that same trajectory.
Okay, so this is like this natural law of technology that it's just going to expand. Yeah,
exactly.
So this coming wave, as the book defines it, is all about artificial intelligence and synthetic biology.
Exactly. So these are the two dominant forces that are really going to shape the technological landscape in front of us. And they have huge potential to revolutionize basically every sector.
The book mentions like incredible possibilities for wealth creation and tackling some major global issues with these things.
Absolutely.
Right.
So they're really optimistic about that.
Yeah.
They think AI and synthetic biology could unlock solutions to some of humanity's biggest challenges and create huge economic opportunities along the way.
But there's a huge emphasis on potential dangers too.
Of course.
Right? Like that's a big part of the book.
Yes.
So what are they saying?
They're saying that the very nature of these technologies, as they spread so rapidly, as they become so powerful, it actually carries substantial risks with it. And they argue that these technologies could empower a wide range of actors to do some pretty crazy stuff and cause instability on a scale that we haven't really seen before.
It's striking that one of the authors, Mustafa Suleyman, experienced this firsthand.
He did.
Early on with DeepMind.
Yeah.
Right. Seeing both the good and the bad of AI.
So his personal experience is really pivotal here. So from DeepMind's very beginning, he was very aware of this kind of dual use nature of AI. So it's potential for both good and bad. But what they talk about in the book is kind of this wider revolution that's happening, where AI is feeding into these other technologies like genetic engineering and robotics.
So it's all kind of intertwined.
It's all intertwined. It's this kind of chaotic cross-catalyzing process.
And it's not just about, automation of physical tasks anymore.
No.
The book talks about AI taking over intellectual manual labor as well.
So this is a really key shift, that they're saying AI is becoming capable of performing these really complex cognitive tasks.
Wow. Yeah.
And that could lead to these unprecedented concentrations of power. We even see this on YouTube. There are channels like Mindful Moments that are doing AI-driven analysis of audiobooks.
Okay.
And, you can kind of see that that's just a hint of what's possible as AI starts to be able to process and understand even intellectual content.
It sounds like when these dangers were first raised in tech and policy circles, there was a lot of pushback.
There was
almost denial of the risks.
Yeah, there was this kind of head in the sand mentality of like, oh, we have things under control. But we don't really need to worry about this.
But it feels like that's shifted, like even just recently.
It has.
Right, we're seeing more discussions about job displacement. And then the pandemic highlighted a lot of these risks in synthetic biology. And, we have this whole techlash thing happening. So it feels like the conversation has evolved.
It absolutely has. Those concerns that were once relegated to very small corners of the internet are now making their way into mainstream discourse. And there's a lot more public apprehension, a lot more scrutiny from regulators.
Yeah. Okay. So given all of that, what are some of the things that make this coming wave so hard to contain?
Right.
The book talks about 4 key features.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So walk me through those.
The first one they talk about is how these technologies are inherently very general and omni-use. So unlike a technology that has a very narrow application, like think about a specific type of engine or something, AI and synthetic biology have incredibly broad uses that can go way beyond their initial purpose. So think about a simple tool, like a hammer. So the primary use is driving nails, but you can use a hammer to break a window. You can use a hammer as a weapon. You can use it in all sorts of different ways.
Right.
And with AI and synthetic biology, we see that same thing, but on a much grander scale. Right, because a breakthrough in AI image recognition could have all these implications and everything.
Exactly.
From medical to, surveillance.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's happening so quickly.
Right.
So that's actually the second feature that they talk about. Is this hyper-evolution. So these technologies are developing at such an incredible rate. That any attempt to control them is kind of like...
It's like a moving target.
It's a moving target. And it's accelerating.
Right.
So the regulations, the safety protocols that we put in place today might be obsolete tomorrow.
Oh, wow.
They talk about Moore's Law and just this staggering increase in computing power that we've seen. It's something like a 17 billion-fold increase since the 1970s.
It's hard to even fathom.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom.
Okay, what about the third one?
The third is what they call asymmetric impacts.
Okay.
So this basically means that relatively small groups or even individuals
can wield a disproportionate amount of power using these technologies. They give this example of the conflict in Ukraine. And how these relatively inexpensive AI-powered drones have been really effective against much more expensive conventional weapons. That dramatically lowers the barrier for causing disruption and destruction.
Yeah, and even, non-skate actors could potentially have this power now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's a very scary thought.
Absolutely. Okay, and the final feature?
The final one is increasing autonomy. So these technologies are becoming capable of operating with less and less human intervention. And they're learning and adapting on their own.
Okay, so for example...
They talk about AlphaZero, which is this AI that mastered to a superhuman level.
Just by playing itself.
Just by playing itself in a matter of days.
That's so crazy.
So this growing autonomy makes it really hard to predict their behavior. And it's harder to make sure that they're aligned with our goals as humans.
So all 4 of these things that you just mentioned combined really paint a picture of a future where our traditional methods of controlling technology might be totally inadequate. And that's where the book's concept of the illusion of control comes in. They're
really arguing that we tend to overestimate our ability to contain these truly transformative technologies.
Okay, so how do they back that up?
Well, they look back at history. And we have all these examples where attempts to contain technologies have totally failed. Think about the crossbow, which was banned in some parts of the world, but it ultimately became a dominant weapon until firearms came along. They talk about the efforts to prevent the mechanization of textile production during the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
The Luddites.
Right.
They tried to stop it, but they couldn't.
So it seems like when a technology offers a clear advantage.
Yes.
Or it fills a need, it's really hard to stop it from spreading.
It's like trying to contain water.
Right.
It's going to find a way.
It will find a way.
Okay.
So what about something like nuclear weapons? I mean,
yes,
they're really destructive, but we have contained them.
Yes. So that's the one example that they say, where we have had some success in containing a really powerful technology.
Yeah.
But they argue that that's really an exception.
Okay.
And it's because of this very unique set of circumstances. So first of all, it's incredibly expensive and complex to develop nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
We had decades of international cooperation to put those controls in place. This whole idea of mutually assured destruction, that if one country launches, the others will retaliate.
Right.
That's a pretty strong deterrent.
Yes.
And frankly, a lot of it is luck.
Right.
So they're saying that even in that example, which is really the best example we have of containment, it's still a huge problem.
It's still a problem.
Nuclear proliferation is still a problem.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And they actually argue that AI and synthetic biology are going to be much more difficult to contain than nuclear weapons.
Okay, so if containment is this challenging, what are the underlying forces that are driving this seemingly unstoppable spread? What's making this happen?
So the book identifies 4 key incentives.
Great.
The first one is what they call the openness imperative.
Okay.
And this is this idea that within the scientific and technological communities, there's this very strong culture of open research and sharing information.
Yeah.
It's driven by prestige, collaboration, the pursuit of progress.
Okay.
And there are all these platforms like GitHub and preprint servers like ArcView that really exemplify this ethos.
So it's like the nature of scientific advancement is to share.
It encourages sharing.
Which in turn accelerates everything.
Exactly.
Okay, what's the second one?
The second one is the profit motive.
Okay.
So, most technology is ultimately driven by the desire to make money.
Right.
This is a super potent incentive.
Yeah.
And it's really widely distributed from individual entrepreneurs to huge multinational corporations.
Yeah.
And they argue that this wave of technology actually represents potentially the biggest economic opportunity in history.
Wow. Something to argue with.
It is, and it's going to be a huge driver
that makes sense.
of proliferation.
Okay, what's the third incentive?
The third one is geopolitics.
Okay.
So competition between countries and the pursuit of technological supremacy are major engines for investment in research and development.
It's like an arms race.
It is. It is an arms race.
Called like a specific example.
They talk about China's explicit strategy to achieve global leadership in AI by 2030.
Wow.
And this was after, AlphaGo beat the world champion Go player. And that was kind of a wake-up call for them.
Yeah.
They realized they needed to catch up.
Right.
So they've been making massive investments across all sorts of technological domains.
That's not just companies competing, it's countries competing.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. And the fourth
one they talk about is ego.
Oh.
So
human nature.
Human nature. The desire for recognition, success. To leave a legacy. This is a big driver.
It's a big driver for me.
For all of us.
Absolutely. Okay. So we have openness, profit motive, geopolitics, and ego, all pushing this forward.
Exactly.
Making containment incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So what are the potential dangers if we fail to contain this?
So they outline these things that they call amplifiers of fragility.
Okay.
And these are things that make the world a more dangerous and unstable place.
So what are some examples?
One big one is just entirely new forms of attack and vulnerability. So AI could empower malicious actors to create threats that we haven't even thought of yet.
Right.
We don't even know what those look like.
And we're already seeing these sophisticated disinformation campaigns using deepfakes and AI-generated content. That book mentioned some pretty disturbing examples.
They did.
Like I think that manipulated video of Nancy Pelosi that was designed to mislead people.
Exactly. And those kinds of things can really erode trust in information, undermine societal stability.
Yeah.
Because they blur the lines between reality and fabrication.
And it's not just deepfakes. It's also like those bots that were amplifying calls to reopen America during the pandemic?
Yes.
So there are real-world consequences to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so beyond the intentional misuse, the book also highlights risks of accidents, particularly in synthetic biology, like lab leaks and stuff. And they had some pretty frightening examples.
They did. There have been incidents in the past involving dangerous pathogens being released accidentally.
And those are scary.
They are very scary.
Absolutely. And then there's that whole potential for disruption to the labor market.
Yes.
As AI takes over more and more tasks.
Yeah.
Not just physical, but also
cognitive.
Yeah. And it feels like we might be approaching this point where human skills just can't keep up.
In a lot of areas.
Yeah, and I've seen some economic data that shows like a decline in the proportion of good-paying jobs.
That's right.
So that's a big concern.
Yeah.
So all these fragilities that we've been talking about really pose a challenge to the traditional nation state.
Yeah, they actually talk about this idea of the weakening nation state, which is basically this idea that the characteristics of this wave of technology and all these fragilities are making it really hard for nation states to govern and regulate effectively. And it's kind of this paradox because states need to embrace these technologies to remain competitive, but then they become vulnerable to their misuse. So it's this really tricky balancing act.
And then we have these incredibly powerful corporations emerging, right?
Yes.
Some of them have market caps larger than entire countries. So the book suggests that these entities could become even more powerful than nation states.
Yeah, they talk about how AI resources and talent are concentrated in the hands of a very small number of corporations.
And they talk about these post-sovereign actors. Right. Which could be huge corporations or even like well-funded non-state groups.
Right. So imagine like ISIS.
Oh, why?
But with incredibly advanced technology.
That's really scary.
Yeah, that's a scary thought.
And on the other hand, the book mentions the potential rise of authoritarianism and surveillance states as a response to this, like China's surveillance systems. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
It is. It's a very complex picture with a lot of potential downsides.
Yeah. So given all of these risks and the potential weakening of governments, the book really emphasizes that we need to figure out containment.
Containment is essential.
Even if it seems impossible.
Even if it seems impossible.
So what do they mean by containment?
Right. So they're not saying that we need to stop technological progress. They're saying that we need to develop the capacity to prevent these technologies from being used for harmful purposes. We need to be able to redirect research that's going in a dangerous direction. And we need to deny access to these powerful tools to people who would misuse them.
So it's about stewardship, not suppression.
Exactly.
Okay. And I know that the book ends by outlining several key elements of a containment strategy. So what are those?
So they talk about things like building technical safety directly into the design of these technologies. Implementing audits and transparency measures. Identifying choke points in the development process. Fostering a strong sense of ethical responsibility among scientists and engineers, encouraging businesses to adopt a broader sense of purpose beyond just profit, empowering governments to develop the expertise and the regulatory frameworks to oversee these technologies, and then fostering international collaboration so that we can harmonize our response.
Those are all really important.
They are.
So it's a very multifaceted approach.
It is.
Acknowledging the complexity of the problem.
Exactly. There's no silver bullet here. It's going to require a lot of different things working together.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive into the coming wave.
It has.
And it leaves us with a lot to think about.
It does. You know, I think the big question for all of us is what role are we going to play in shaping this future? How do we balance innovation and responsibility?
That's the question for all of us.
That's the question for everyone listening.
So if you found this deep dive valuable, please subscribe to the show for more in-depth analysis of really important issues.
Please do.
Share this episode with anyone you think would benefit from this conversation. And if you want to learn more about the coming wave, you can find a link to purchase it in the show notes. Your critical thinking is going to be essential as we navigate this wave of technology.
It is.
So keep thinking critically and stay engaged.